The wise shall lead and rule, and the ignorant shall follow. Plato. Wise or not?
Well, you need to put it into context, don't you, to find out what
Always.
he was really saying.
So this week in the UK, we've been, well, in fact, when was the election in Wales? I get so confused with timing. Cause,
I think it was a while ago, a week or two ago.
Yeah, because we've been kind of away for a bit.
Back. It was definitely before the schools went back.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So there's a big election here, lots of elections that were taking place, and part of it was for in Wales for what's called the Senate there, and Reform. So our kind of right-wing populist party here in the UK was expected to do very well.
Polling suggested that they would win.
Yeah, polling suggested they win, and they did not.
And they lost quite handily. I mean, they weren't even close.
Big gains, but they
Percentage-wise, right? They gained a lot
Percentage-wise.
percentage-wise, but they lost quite handily.
Yeah.
I think Plaid Cymru won with just under 50% of the vote, but if you added up Plaid Cymru's vote and Labour's vote, it was 70% of the population-ish.
Yeah.
So I mean, the left, center-left parties did very well.
Yeah.
But the BBC still went and spoke to
the Reform candidates to find out what they were feeling.
Oh my goodness. And I think on one of these panels, the Plaid Cymru wasn't even on it, the winner went, but the Reform was there spouting about it. I mean, it's crazy what's happening with the BBC.
Because it's dominated by what's happening and it's dominated by what's happening in England and London. And so what happens in the regions or Wales or Scotland really doesn't matter so much.
Although they're giving huge amounts of airtime to Reform, even when Reform loses.
Yeah.
Right. So I think the right-wing management at the BBC are pushing Reform and trying to make it seem like they're inevitable. Feels
Indeed.
like that.
There's a lot of commentary
It
along
feels
those
like
lines. That. Yeah. Well, speaking of Reform, also there's been quite a lot in recent weeks about the former head of Reform in Wales, Nathan Gill, who has pleaded guilty to 8 counts of bribery by Russia.
On behalf of the Russians, yes. Not that this is a huge surprise to anyone who's paid any attention to Reform and what's going on with Reform. I mean, Nigel Farage has been cozying up to Russia for ages. He's been doing...
What do you mean? Because he was, I quote, stunned by what had happened to Nathan Gill. He was a bad apple. Oh, right. We have heard that one before.
I mean, Nigel Farage has been...
Nigel Farage was on
RT, right?
Yeah, when RT used to broadcast in the UK, he was on numerous times and got paid to be on it. So he was offered his own show on RT, which he did turn down.
Well, he was a huge proponent of Brexit, which we know was exactly what Putin wanted, right?
Yeah, I mean that's the connecting kind of line here, and. There's a journalist here, Carol who used to write for The Guardian and The Observer, and now I think she's with a group that's going to set up her own, because that's what's happening now. You're having to set up your own organization, basically your own media organization, and we've seen that with.
It's happening in the States also.
Yeah. That's what the news agents is. It's some ex-BBC journalists who couldn't take being part of the BBC any longer, and so set up their own
and specifically because they were being censored on behalf of the right wing, right? Yeah. Specifically because they were
being told what
they had to. Then they weren't free to report the news and the facts as they found them. It had to be given a right wing slant.
Yeah,
because the billionaires who want right-wing parties in power they own our mainstream media.
Yeah.
So it's a scary thing.
I read a piece by Karl Cadwallader this week, and the title of it is something extraordinary, like it's something to do with the cleavage.
Okay.
That's as far as I got. I was like, right, I've got to read that. But it's because one of the characters in the story she's talking about, there are all these pictures of her scantily clad.
Right.
And so Carol's point was that ordinarily the media would be all over a story where one of the characters, there's this plethora of images that they could put on their pages of an attractive woman, and in fact they've done, they do that all the time
to sell papers. Yep.
But not this story.
So why?
This story is not being covered, and the story is that she is the wife of the Russian agent who was the agent that got Nathan Gill.
That was bribing him.
That was bribing Nathan Gill. And his name is, I've got a wee note here, so I'm Ole Voloshin, and she's Nadia Sass is the wife. And she's a good friend of Nigel Farage's.
Surprise, surprise.
Yeah, this is how it all gets tied together.
There are loads of Russian connections. Mm-hmm.
So this husband and wife team have apparently been targeting politicians all across Europe and then bribing them to give speeches or to promote the talking points that come out of the Kremlin. And here's
Russia
the
does
head
not
of,
have our best interest at heart.
No.
Needless to say.
No, indeed.
So if they're trying to bribe our politicians,
yeah, why?
Right.
I mean, the question is why,
and
here it's. I mean, so much of it is tied to Brexit here, and that we know that one of the things Putin wants to do is to destroy the European Union
because it's a check on his power.
Yeah,
right?
and it's a positive partnership of people
working
pooling
together.
their sovereignty in order to work together to do something more than they could do individually, and he does not want that. His doorstep because it checks what
he's able to do
east of Europe.
Yes, well, we're obviously countries are stronger when they're working together than if everyone's pulling in different directions.
Yeah.
Which actually, ironically enough, Brexit has taught the UK since we've decided to go on our own. We've been much weaker.
Well, taught a lot of other nations in Europe who were thinking about doing the same, and then what's happened.
And then they saw us shoot ourselves in the foot and realized, "Oh, no thanks.
We don't want to have any of that."
Yeah.
So this there's a really good interview that James O'Brien had with Carol Cadwallader, but I think he's the only journalist who's got like a big kind of public voice who has picked up this story. But there's a really good interview. In fact, I think in the piece has put a whole transcript of that interview up as well. I'll maybe put it in the description of of this so that folks can go and have a read of it. But I mean the point is, and what they kind of start off talking about is that back in 2020, one of the the parliamentary committees on intelligence and security produced a report where they said themselves that the UK government had completely fallen asleep at the wheel in understanding what Russia was up to, in how they were trying to manipulate what was going on in politics.
So we were vulnerable.
And that was in the lead up to the EU referendum.
Right.
We
vulnerable
were
to
vulnerable
Russian manipulation.
And then so what's kind of different to the United States and here is that in the United States they did actually launch so the Mueller report was this massive report which did reveal a lot of what was going on. Now, of course, that was Bill Barr, the Attorney General at the time, managed to squash that and to rewrite the narrative around it so that anyone who hasn't read the report will just think it says nothing. In actual fact, it lays out over and over again the ways that Russia was manipulating the politics of the United States. And of course, the same thing was happening here, but we didn't even investigate it. We just put our head in the sand and pretend that if we don't look, then we don't need to worry about what's happening, which is unbelievable.
Although, was it that? I mean, because Boris Johnson was, so there are members of the Conservative Party
who are tied
up with Russian money, right?
So Boris Johnson has put in to the House of Lords this Evgeny Lebedev, right? Whose dad, it says in the media an ex-KGB agent, but everything I've read is that you are never an ex-KGB agent. You're always playing the game in some way. And after the Novichok, so that assassination kind of attempt through this nerve agent in Salisbury, wasn't it? Which ended up killing. The person it was targeting survived, but it ended up killing somebody else.
Was it like a daughter and a father? It was a daughter
and a father, and the father was an ex-agent from Russia, and they were trying to get rid of him. But a member of the public found the bottle, right, and thought it was perfume. Okay. That's what it was kind of pretending to be, and she died. So, I mean, that is an act of espionage and some form of warfare on British soil. And in the weeks after that, that's when Boris Johnson, he actually
went off to
evaded his security team in order to go off to the Lebedev's house on the Mediterranean somewhere, wasn't it? On the continent,
and
to have a huge party.
And he was the foreign secretary at the time, wasn't
Foreign secretary at the time.
And he was,
and cavorting with an ex-KGB agent.
So it does raise the question of whether, you say we put our head in the sand, but possibly that was a deliberate choice because some people who were making the decisions actively didn't want us to uncover Russian involvement because they were possibly benefiting from it. I mean, so possibly head in the sand, like genuinely just didn't want to know, possibly head in the sand, I want to hide this. It's hard to know.
And I mean, it's worth saying that the Lebedevs own, that family own the Independent and the Evening Standard, a London-based paper.
Yeah.
So they own part of our UK media.
So Russian-linked,
owning British media,
millionaires, billionaires,
and then and then tied up, oligarchs, and then tied up with former British Prime Minister.
Hence the need for independent media.
Yeah, exactly.
And just as a quick plug, I know that we subscribe to both Heather Cox Richardson and The Bulwark, and a lot of these independent media outlets are putting out a lot of their content for free, but they really need us to support them. Yeah. I was just on the way into work listening to Timothy Snyder was giving it was a talk that he was doing, and I think it just was released yesterday, and he was saying, you need to choose. It's really important that we choose some of this independent media that we really trust and that we want their the information to get out there, and you need to pay some of these subscriptions. Obviously, you can't pay for all of them, but that's really important because we can't really trust the media, the mainstream media that's coming at us, whether you're in the States or in the UK, having these independent voices, people who are reputable, who do their work, who are good journalists, who are knowledgeable. We need to support them financially.
Absolutely. Should also be said that there's no fee for this wonderful podcast.
But like and subscribe.
Exactly. So definitely what we've seen amongst the British elites, those that were in power, is an astonishing tolerance towards what Russia has been doing in our own background. our
Backyard,
backyard is what I meant to say.
Yeah.
I was about to say playground, which I think is what we would say here in the UK. And then
backyard.
And then I went to backyard.
As American.
Exactly. This is what happens when you're a mixture in our family. So which brings us around to the topic where we've flirted around in the last couple of weeks.
The paradox of tolerance.
The paradox of tolerance. I meant to bring through, which I haven't, the book, which is sitting on my desk, like the Karl Popper book, which is really where this sort of idea comes from, and that he kind of popularized, I guess. As I was saying to you earlier, it's popularized, but it only appears in a footnote in this book. But of course, it's become quite a big thing. So the book is called The Open Society and Its Enemies, and Popper wrote it kind of during the Second World War, really, as he was seeing what was going on in the world.
And the rise of fascism and what that led to, how it led to the World War II. And
how societies were just not prepared for what was happening. So how it was able to get a hold of this totalitarianism, was able to get hold of things. The phrase an open society is a little bit earlier, so from the early 1930s. It's Henri Bergson, and in some ways comparing it to a closed society. So a closed society being like a theocracy or something, where there are these set rules and ideas that do not change, and that's it. So that's what. Whereas an open society,
it allows for the free exchange of ideas, and people can have different beliefs, and we respect different ideas and different
There's
beliefs.
Not one set way that things have to be done. It's up for the community as a whole to talk about it and work their way to an agreement.
And more individualism, right? People can have their individual ideas. You don't have to conform to this, to as you said, in a closed society, one specific way of thinking or right. And you would think, I mean, with human beings being as different as they naturally are, a closed society, you can only really maintain that through force, right? Because you can't actually force people to believe something. You can force people to act like they believe something, perhaps, but you can't really enforce.
Ooh, there's a
belief,
good one.
Right?
I mean, isn't that the end of 1984 though?
Yeah.
That you are left with that. Wow, because that's how it ends, right? In the
gosh, it's been so long
isn't the last line something about "and I learned to love Big Brother"?
I think,
or something along those lines. So that is where it actually.
And so, does he really believe it, or has he just learned to act like he believes it?
Or in acting like you do for long enough to actually.
Absolutely, that does happen.
Yeah,
right.
Yeah. So Popper kind of develops this idea of the open society and sees it as this kind of like a transition from kind of societies as kind of tribal societies, so these kind of closed societies of everyone same kind of thinking, towards that. There's almost this is where we get into the sort of the moral arc and all of that stuff that I think we've mentioned before, but that things would tend towards to moving towards an open society. And I think he does talk a bit about, like, once you've moved to an open society, you can't move back because it's like open the door to that. There can still be the things that attract you back, but it would never actually go back. Now that's where I'm not entirely sure.
Because surely that's the kind of thing you saw in like Germany in the 30s, right? Because the Weimar Republic to Nazi Germany,
and they thought they would exist for 1,000 years, and they existed for only a
so is that what he's
two.
Saying? That while you might have this retrenchment to a more closed society, it's not stable. Yes, I think that's probably true.
Yeah.
But goodness me, if you're living through that movement back towards a closed society and then living through it till you finally break out of it again, that's pretty traumatic.
It is.
I mean, as we can see from the example of the 40s,
So that's yeah. I mean, that's kind of where he's coming from, and that exactly what you're saying about that kind of emphasis on personal decision making as part of this, rather than the sort of
decisions
one
made for you.
group that just
groupthink kind of thing.
Yeah, indeed. And so why democracy is quite important here. Just to mention that George Soros, who is like the big boogeyman for the right wing in America, for sure. I think in the UK amongst reform kind of voters, I'm sure they would see, because George Soros, he funds work that is all over the world. And his foundation that does that is called the Open Society Foundation. So it is clearly based on Popper's work here,
yes.
What he's talking about. He's given $32 billion.
Yes, amazing.
Dollars of his own
really
wealth to support that work.
They should be giving away that money. No one should be having. In fact, we shouldn't. We should structure society so billionaires don't exist. But given that they do,
I think it's about 60% of his wealth or something like that he's given away, which is, I think, more than anyone else of this uber super rich kind of group. The point of the Open Society Foundation is to advance justice, democracy, education, public health, and independent media. So does that give you a clue?
Hates it.
Exactly.
But the thing is, I feel like when I talk, like I know a couple of people who have thrown, George Soros bad at me. And I just feel like, do you even know
any idea
what kind of work he funds? And I suspect the answer is no, because it just feels like right-wing talking points from this media that is controlled by the very wealthy, who want us to be nitpicking at each other, so we're not looking at them. And so that's crazy.
So I mean, it is true that George Soros funds a lot of work around the world that is trying to engage people in what an open society looks like, and trying to work towards an open society. So, I mean, that is true, but it's just become used now as a way to dismiss any. So the big marches that took place a couple of weekends ago were dismissed as funded by George Soros.
But actually, I mean, to be fair, like if you think, I mean, if he's funding work to promote having an open society and democracy, and so it is really quite on brand for a wannabe totalitarian, authoritarian dictator to hate George Soros, right? I mean that's what we're seeing in the States. So that's quite on brand. I mean, I think the hatred for George Soros coming from the Trump administration would be absolutely genuine, because he's funding work that is opposing their project of taking us back to a controlled society, and what looks like they're developing now a police state, right? With
it's happening right in front of our eyes.
You can see it happening.
Indeed.
So,
I mean, George Soros is obviously quite a smart guy. Clearly over to have gained all this, but he's not. Although he's obviously a fan of Popper's work here, he's not entirely ignorant to some of the weaknesses in the argument. So he's clear that he thinks Popper just couldn't have grasped where media would get to now, and how much So I think he has a bit of a critique over this notion of the sort of inevitability of the open society, in that the media and advertising and political advertising, all that is effective. It does work. It does shift people's understanding. That Overton window does shift, and what people treat as normal does move. And you see all this. So he's building on what Popper was talking about in practical sense, whereas Popper was all kind of theoretical, what he was talking about, but not entirely without critique. So you've been listening to the book. I've been reading it, and I think we've basically got to a very similar point in the book.
You're a little bit further on than I am.
Maybe a little bit, but there's still a long way to go. So we're right at the early stages, but we are at the point at which he does reference the paradox of tolerance, and it's in a section where he's talking about Plato. And
who was the big baddie? Who knew? I was a philosophy major, and the Platonic ideals and right, all of this kind of stuff. But then you actually start listening to what Popper's talking about, his critique of what Plato was doing, and you think, wow, because Plato was a big proponent of this closed society, of the kind of totalitarian mindset, and he was critiquing,
and I suppose critiquing some of what was happening around
Athens,
him. So that's why, you start to see the progression towards an open society starting in Greek culture, so that this kind of moves towards a more democratic system of other people rather than just a single leader dominating.
And even the movement towards getting rid of slavery and things, there's this kind of growing awareness of the evil that was. I don't know if they thought of it in terms of evil, but the fact that it wasn't a good thing. And Plato was way against all of that, because everyone has their place and everyone has their, it's almost like a caste system, isn't it?
Yeah.
And everyone needs to stay in their lane, and you have your rulers and they're going to rule, and you have your slaves and they're going to be the drudges. And even so far as to talk about, the rulers are really the shepherds, and then the slaves and the drudges are literally kind of animals,
the sheep that they're supposed to follow.
Absolutely. And they're not, and they don't really have much more agency than farm animals do in Plato's ideal society. So Plato, not such a nice guy.
No. and so Popper keep coming back to this question about that, the who should rule kind of question, and the sort of the inevitable, if you just kind of take that question at face value and think about it, you're like, well, you kind of want somebody who is going to be good at ruling, right?
Yeah, somebody who's intelligent, someone
who's wise, and all that sort of thing. Maybe somebody who's strong, maybe who's got strong will about something, or maybe somebody who's born to be a ruler.
Yes.
And you start to see how it all starts to slip. That's right. I would suggest, some folks would see the master of doing a deal is clearly supposed to be the ruler, right? And then before you know it, you're at master race, and you've got to be white and male and all the rest of it in order to
you can see how that kind of thought leads directly to Nazi Germany with the Aryan race, and
though I suppose
casting people outside the kind of Germanic ideal as subhuman, and then we saw where that led.
I suppose in Marxism you would see, though, the sort of the argument between those who are the capitalists, the bourgeoisie, and those who are the people.
The workers,
so then there's this sort of fight between who should rule, but between them. But that, again, Popper would critique that and say this is it's the wrong question to be asking about who should rule. And he talked quite a lot about sovereignty. And where we find sovereignty, who has power, and that in any even if you go to the kind of Stalin, Hitler, whatever situation where it looks like it's absolutely one person rule, it isn't.
Well, they're still dependent on everyone else,
they have to have a whole team around them
to
put it into action. So there's always dependency there. So there is never this kind of ultimate one person is sovereign that is part of it. But I thought this was quite his better question to ask, the bit about how do we organize things so that incompetent or wicked rulers can be stopped from doing too much damage.
And that is the
So
$64,000 question. And
There's the
actually,
question.
in America, the founding fathers thought that they'd done that.
They did a huge amount of work.
They did
on
a
that.
huge amount of work to prevent someone like Donald Trump from coming in and taking over, and all of the safeguards that they thought they put in place have just laid down in front of Trump. You know? So
all the checks. The checks and balances that we talk about, the limitations the institutional limitations that are put on somebody's power or on a given group's power are dependent on people using them. You've got to fight. I think it was...
And the founders really thought that Congress would protect its own power. They didn't foresee a Congress like we have right now, where the senators are just giving up their power. And Mike Johnson is actually just... He wants to keep the government shut down. He wants the House of Representatives to have no role in government in order to protect Trump from like the Epstein files being released and all of this kind of stuff. But the founders never envisioned.
They assumed this is in the United States we're talking about here, where you've got the kind of judicial branch, the executive and the kind of the parliamentary, if you like, but the Congress side of things, that they would be equally fighting their own corner.
Because they're supposed to be co-equal branches of government.
So they fight for the power that is there under their domain, and not to give that up, because that is theirs. And so I remember before the last American election, so when all of all of these legal cases against Trump were going through the courts, and I was listening to a few legal podcasts just to understand a bit of, because it was complicated, a lot of the stuff that was going on, what was happening. And I remember some folks that are really experienced lawyers for decades talking about how ultimately a lot of these decisions would end up at the Supreme Court. And they were, even though we have lots of these very far right justices, that they will stop at giving up their own power, because that's what makes them who they are. It was that taken as it was completely naive, because that is exactly what is happening, both in Congress and in the
kind of Republican Supreme Court. I mean, they're supposed to be non-partial, but we clearly have a captured Republican Supreme Court.
So they are not fighting, and then if these other co-equal branches don't fight, then that's it.
And to be fair, lower courts are.
Yes, they are.
Lower courts are fighting.
But ultimately,
everything
that will come up to the Supreme Court. And that's where it's all
scary.
So that's part of the important thing there. Popper had this nice wee quote. It appears to me madness to base all our political efforts upon the faith and hope that we shall be successful in obtaining excellent or even competent rulers.
Oh my goodness, that's a little depressing, isn't it?
It was a little aside before he went back to the theoretical on his own personal views.
Well, I guess he was writing in the 40s, wasn't he? So
he was seeing it.
He was seeing a lot of, how these, very evil men had come to power and maintained power,
and caused millions and millions of people,
amounts of destruction
to die. So this is where we then get into some of the paradoxes that Popper describes. So the first of them is the paradox of freedom.
Okay.
And this is a lot of this is he's trying to appeal to those who would be like us, more on the kind of liberal spectrum of things, would see democracy as a good, that for society it's a good thing, that a kind of majority rule in some ways is important and necessary for a healthy society. To challenge that view, so the paradox of freedom. The freedom is when there's an absence of a restraining control, is what he's describing here. That can lead to people then voting
to give up their freedom.
Mm-hmm. That they do not want to rule. We would rather have a tyrant rule over us.
And again, so now, and we've talked about that before.
Yep.
When we've talked about the kind of high right-wing authoritarianism scale, and if you get, and there is a consistent 30-ish percentage of the general population who will score very highly on this high right-wing authoritarianism scale, and they genuinely do want a strong. They're absolutely okay with a strong man as long as that strong man is implementing their views. So they do actually want a close, because they're comfortable in their groups that everyone thinks the same way. That is where they feel safe. They feel like they want to. They're quite happy to impose that on other people. So there is in every society a constituency for this. Vote yourself out of your freedoms.
Yeah.
Because they don't actually feel like they're voting themselves out of their freedoms, because they think that they're voting for their viewpoint to be imposed on other people.
And I think that's what...
By a strong man. And I think there's this recognition that only a strong man can do that, right? Someone who takes away other people's freedoms, ends the
Indeed.
society.
And that's, I think Popper's, that he kind of pushes back and saying that's why freedom, sort of, this is the paradox of freedom. Freedom has to have restraints in it. Otherwise, you give the space for the bully to be a tyrant over the meek.
Yeah.
So even though it doesn't affect you, it is going to affect, and that's exactly what we are seeing happening now, is that you're seeing those who are vulnerable. Do you know, you know Cenk Uygur, who so he's
TYT, the Young Turks.
Yeah, it's an independent media organization, and we used to watch them a lot.
I haven't watched them in ages.
There's been some strange things going on in where they've kind of ended up with things, but they were coming from a very progressive in the States kind of place, and very supportive of Bernie Sanders and back in the day,
I remember.
All that kind of thing. But he was just on Piers Morgan's show, and so we were talking about Stephen Miller a week or so ago. His wife was on it as well. Katie, I think
Stephen Miller's wife was also
wife
on the show.
Was also on this show with Cenk Uygur. There, I think there were 4 or 5 of them on, and Cenk was giving it loudly at it, and
about
I can't remember exactly what it was that he was talking. It doesn't really matter what he was talking about. What matters is that she, as the wife of the person who may be one of the
deputy chief of staff,
and has the national security advisor, and the one who is driving all of the anti-immigration stuff, she says to him, I wonder if you're, because he is a naturalized citizen in the United States, I wonder if all of your paperwork was correct. An absolute threat to him that she will get her husband to see if they could kick him out.
Because he's saying something that doesn't agree with her.
Yeah.
So, you can totally see where this... the current version of the Republican Party wants a closed society. Yeah. They don't want, Trump,
an open exchange of ideas.
Trump is openly shutting down. Shutting down people who make fun of him, putting pressure on news organizations to cover him in a certain way in order to have their mergers go through and things. Yeah. So, and this is all echoing, again, this is what I was listening to Timothy Snyder. A lot of this is echoing what we saw in Hungary, what we saw in Russia. What Trump is doing.
What happened in Russia and Hungary took years.
Yes, that's what he was saying.
Decades.
Much faster.
And now it's happened in a year.
Yeah. But it is this movement away from an open society to a closed society where there is a received wisdom, and you better toe that line, as Stephen Miller's wife was threatening Jink with, right?
Yeah, you don't toe the line, we're going to kick you out,
even
though you are a citizen of the United States. It is scary stuff. It's happening.
But of course, the paradox is
that people have voted for this.
Yes, people have voted for it.
Yeah. So
of course, a lot of people will say,
real.
I didn't vote for that. I didn't vote for that. Yeah, but of course, we knew it was going to happen. But then again, I think this is the role of the captured media that we have. We do a lot of listening to independent media, and we're very skeptical of the sound bites that you get from the mainstream media, whatever version you're listening to. And we're much more, let's do a deep dive, long form journalism. Let's find out the real information. Who has time for that other than geeks like us?
No,
right.
Indeed.
But, so I think some people genuinely, so I think is that part of the paradox of freedom is that you can be led to vote against your best interest if there are people with enough resources feeding you lies.
And right? I mean, the open society is dependent on. I mean, it was one of the things that George Soros says in his whole thing. An independent media,
yes,
and education.
Yeah,
it's so people have to be well informed about the reality of what is going on,
and we clearly aren't,
and that is not.
That is really clearly not the case in the States, right?
So
sadly.
So the problem with this is that it can lead to for folks that are pro-democratic, this absolute paralysis in when you're confronted with the situation that's happened in the United States or in other parts of Europe, as Hungary we're
Russia,
talking about, that people. If you're supportive of democracy, you're on the one hand, I want the principle
people
of democracy,
vote,
so I need to support the right of people to vote for this, but then I cannot support what is the
because
the
they're
end
voting
result.
to take away everyone's right to vote, right?
Yeah.
Essentially.
Yeah.
Right? They're making it so that even if you, like in Russia, people still vote, but it's a foregone conclusion what the result is going to be, right? And there is no chance that the pro-Putin party is going to be kicked out, right?
Yeah.
So, it's
So that's the paradox of freedom, and then of course that then ties into, we finally get there, to the paradox of tolerance. So here, where the argument is, if you have unlimited tolerance, then that inevitably leads to the disappearance of tolerance.
Yeah. Yes, I mean it is. Yes, and I've had this conversation with some of my very conservative family members, and they'll just say, "Oh, the left is so tolerant, but they won't tolerate us." And of course, right. The thing is I'm like, well, you can have your own belief systems. You can believe, for example, as my family does, that homosexuality is wrong. That's how I was raised, in the conservative evangelical world. But you can't legislate that, right? You can't then make laws to outlaw other beliefs about homosexuality, which is what they want to do, right? I mean, in an open society, surely people. It breaks my heart that there are people who still cling to these. These kind of tribal beliefs that homosexuality is wrong, because that belief causes so much damage, right? But that's a really different.
But they can do that.
They can have their own beliefs.
They can have those beliefs. It's when you then try to litigate those beliefs and that anyone who has a different view is not allowed to have that view any longer,
right? And in
order to be an acceptable part of society.
And you saw that even within the Church of Scotland as it moved towards more acceptance of LGBT members, kind of into leadership positions, and now we're in, we're not all the way there, but we're in a good place. But it was always the case on our side that there should be freedom of conscience, and people should be. And if you did believe that homosexuality was wrong, then you wouldn't be forced to perform, to officiate at a gay marriage or a same-sex marriage or whatever. But then if you wanted to officiate at a same-sex marriage, you could. But we've come a long way. But the original fight was, no, we believe homosexuality is wrong. So even if you don't believe that it's wrong, our view trumps yours, and you can't do what you want, right? You can't follow your conscience because it impinges on ours. It's a very kind of warped way of seeing things, right? It's that if you don't agree with me, then and you act in a way consistent with your own beliefs, you're hurting me. Well, no, I'm just being consistent with my own conscience. And it's a really tricky one.
Yeah. I mean, I was at a meeting this week where we had a report that was presented that's the kind of draft form that's about the thinking about the church in a modern secular society, and so the kind of decline in numbers that we see. Make sure to clarify that, because there's a huge amount of commitment and dedication by still 250,000 odd people in the Church of Scotland, but there was a comment raised that was trying to open the door to seeing that part of the reason for the decline, which started back in the 1950s, was because of the decision. Some of the decisions that have been made. And you're like, hang on a minute. That's a right red herring, that is, to what is going on. Yes. So Popper talks about if we extend unlimited tolerance, even to those who are intolerant, if we're not prepared to defend a tolerant society against the onslaught of the intolerant, then those who are tolerant will be destroyed, and tolerance will go with it. And that is what we've seen. I mean, I don't know. He has, as I say, his bit about the paradox of tolerance is just in a footnote,
which I'm listening to, so I'm not getting.
So you're not going to get the footnote. So let me just read. I'll do it in three chunks, kind of what he says about unpacking the paradox of tolerance, and then we can stop and have a chat about each of these. So he doesn't imply that we should always suppress the utterance of intolerant philosophies. These are his words, which is kind of what you were just talking about. As long as we can counter them by rational argument and keep them in check by public opinion, suppression would certainly be most unwise. So that is
so an open discussion of ideas is important as long as people are able to effectively evaluate. People are educated enough, and they're getting enough correct information to be able to effectively evaluate the strength of the different arguments.
Yes, and
we've already talked about how some of those elements aren't in place in our current situation.
That implies that there's a desire towards the truth that is sort of equally held by folks. This desire to get, to work your way towards the truth, but that in a closed society, that isn't. I mean, the truth is so governed by the kind of rules and laws around that.
But it's not even the closed society. I mean, this goes back to Haidt that we were talking about. We're not actually, as people, motivated to find the truth. We're motivated to reinforce our preconceptions. Yeah. Right? Yeah. So there's a lot, psychologically speaking, that Popper wasn't, back in the 40s, we wouldn't have had. But psychological understanding. The psychological understanding is we like to think we're motivated by a rational search for the truth, but we're not actually. Yeah. We would much prefer to have our own ideas reinforced, even if they're wrong.
Well, that's definitely that's definitely true. That's clearly true.
So so there are a lot of problems that we are running up against.
He goes on, but we should claim the right to suppress them.
So these ideas, damaging ideas,
intolerant ideas, if necessary, even by force. For it may easily turn out that they are not prepared to meet us on the level of rational argument, but begin by denouncing all argument. They may forbid their followers to listen to rational argument because it is deceptive, and teach them to answer arguments by the use of their fists or pistols.
I mean, this is on the nose, right? It does sound like where we are. And speaking as someone who was raised in a very conservative evangelical background, I know, for example, I plan to major in history and religion at university. But if you were going to major in religion, and I was primarily taking classes about Christianity. I took several. Yeah. But to major in religion, you couldn't only take classes about one religion. You had to have classes.
Some world religion.
Right.
Kind of,
and so my dad said, if you choose to take a class that's about a different religion, I won't pay for that. You will have to make up that you will have to pay for whatever that particular class costs. Now, I was paying for part of my education, and my parents helped out a lot, but they were going to withdraw some of their help if I took a non-Christian religion.
So that
they didn't want me to hear, and that's very emblematic of certainly the way I was raised is that you need to not, we're in the world, but not of the world. This is the language that would be used. You need to make sure that you keep yourself apart. And you don't, like my parents really wanted me to go to a Christian university. And that's become even more extreme into the 90s and the early 2000s with the rise of the homeschooling movement. And all of that is about isolating your kids, isolating your family, not letting them have access to any information out with what you decide to provide.
Yeah.
So, I mean, that's exactly what Popper was talking about.
Yeah, you see that is, and you just, I mean, even you just see it if you listen. I mean, heaven forbid, don't do it for your own sanity's sake. But if you listen to Donald Trump or some of the J.D. Vance around, and just the kind of their argumentation for things, it's all just about denying anyone else's position. There is no sense of which you have had with other leaders in the past that trying to engage with other people. I mean, you remember it was such a famous case when it was one of the town halls that John McCain did, where somebody from the audience started talking about Barack Obama as a Muslim and blah, blah, blah. And John McCain, put her in her place and said,
cut her off.
Gently did it, but put her in a place, said, no. He's not. I know him. He's I think he said he's a Christian. I can't remember exactly what he said, but anyway, he put her right on. Now that would never happen now.
And to be honest, I mean, among the people that I know, on the kind of Christian conservative evangelical right, they all voted for McCain, but there was a fair amount of reluctance in there. He wasn't as hardline as they wanted, right? He was better than Obama. He was too tolerant. Right, he was too tolerant, absolutely. Yeah. As we said, there is a constituency for strongman rule.
Yeah.
And in the States, certainly within, surveys show that a much higher percentage of right-wing conservative evangelicals hold these high right-wing authoritarian views than people in the general population. Although they're fairly high, they can be high, in lots of different groups, but they're particularly high with conservative evangelicals in America. Yeah. Right. Which again, I will say, I do think is quite different than conservative evangelicals in the UK. It's quite in many ways, it's quite a different beast. And so there are similarities and there are some theological similarities, but the kind of hyper partisan political aspect is very different in the States and here.
Just
in the UK.
remember that what happens in the States often happens here a decade later.
Yeah,
you know?
I hope that's not going to happen.
Yeah.
But just to clarify, things have
what you're
gotten
saying.
quite
No,
extreme in the
indeed.
States in a way that I don't see
Yeah.
happening here with the people I know here who are evangelical. It's quite just different.
Yeah. The last bit that Popper says on this paradox of tolerance, he says, we should therefore claim, in the name of tolerance, the right not to tolerate the intolerant. We should claim that any movement preaching intolerance places itself outside the law, and we should consider incitement to intolerance and persecution as criminal, in the same way as we should consider incitement to murder, or to kidnapping, or to the revival of the slave trade as criminal.
Wow, he doesn't mince his words,
No.
does he?
Well, of course, but then of course he was living through
Yes.
what the
inevitable
ramifications
outcome
of this are.
No, you can understand
So
that.
of course there's no point beating around the bush here.
This is where it ends in a world war where millions of people are killed in battle, and then millions of people are exterminated in extermination camps, right?
Yeah.
Like, and then that's not just in Germany. I mean, Stalin in Russia, he killed millions as well. So,
Yep.
yeah.
So
I mean,
and of course, and the fight by the Allies during the Second World War was a push towards trying to hold on to the open society, democratic societies, and it succeeded, but at tremendous cost.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, and so that's why it's just so heartbreaking to see things slipping and sliding their way backwards again. And I don't know if you saw this. I was just hearing from it was an ex-military guy talking about what's going on in the States, and I think is it in Romania? There used to be a big US base, and the contrast was being made between the movement of it's the American aircraft carrier, the President Ford one.
I have not escaped.
You've not been following this news?
No. Amazingly
not
enough.
nerdy enough.
No.
So I think that's the one that has moved towards South America, and so to be this presence around Venezuela. So this whole military build up there. But of course, an aircraft carrier can move relatively quickly from place to place and assert kind of a shifting dominance of power. But what the Trump administration have done is to actually close one of the large bases in Europe, in Romania, and actually properly close it. It's gone.
Away
and so once it's gone, that's it. There's no real going back to it. And that is way more powerful a signal than just moving an aircraft carrier around and about. Yeah. And the signal is NATO, we don't care about you any longer. We're moving our own. And what the signle that then gives to Putin. And it's not just
a signal to NATO, I was going to say, it's a signal to Putin.
Yeah, is that we are not going to be there to defend the eastern.
Have a go.
Exactly. That is what's happening there.
Oh, gosh.
So,
the solution?
So at the end of the footnote,
are there any solutions?
Of Popper,
Popper offers?
He says that what you have to demand in the face of a move towards intolerance is that a government must rule according to the principles of equalitarianism and protectionism, that tolerates all who are prepared to reciprocate. Right. So, in other words, to be tolerant themselves. Right. So you're open to the viewpoints of others, and that mutual exchange of ideas in order to try and move yourself, and that the government must be controlled by and accountable to the public. And of course, that's what the United States you're trying to see that disappear.
Oh yeah,
that
no,
accountability.
no. Yeah, the Republicans are definitely trying to make it so that they're not. Well, they're acting as if they are never going to have to be accountable to the voting public again.
Again, indeed.
So, and then you can see the moves with the kind of gerrymandering in Texas and other Republican states, and then the inevitable screams of outrage from Republicans when Democrats reciprocate. I mean, it is just astonishing to me, the hypocrisy. We want to cheat, but oh my goodness, if you do what we're doing, you are beyond the pale. And the thing is, of course, Democrats had put forward in Congress a bill that would have established nonpartisan redistricting groups in all states, which is obviously what we should be doing. It should be nonpartisan. It should be fairly drawn districts and actually, if we had that, we would have a much less extreme. And we would have Congress. We would have many more people in the middle who are willing to work together. As it is, these districts are drawn in such partisan ways that there are very few competitive districts. They're either very safe Republican or very safe Democrat, and there are very few districts that can swing either way. So the control of the whole government is in these tiny little areas of the country, which is crazy. But anyway,
so that's the equalitarianism that Popper's talking about, isn't it? Is that sense of that we recognize the right of everyone to have an opinion and a say in things, and that, I mean, for a long time actually in the Republican Party, and I think there's been elements of this in the Conservative Party here in the UK as well, is the thought that other parties
aren't legitimate.
Aren't legitimate. Yeah. They don't deserve to rule. Because we went to Eton in order to learn how to become prime ministers. You know, it's that sense that we're the ones that we're born to rule. Well,
which is actually going back to where we started. I mean, that was Plato's idea, that there is a ruling class and they should be ruling, and then the hoi polloi beneath them are just essentially the cattle that need to be managed the way cattle are managed, and the ruling class should be doing that, right? You know, that was Plato's ideal government, speaking of Platonic ideals.
Popper is very realistic in what he says. So he comes up to some kind of form of majority rule, kind of democracy, is and institutions that are there to be truthful and to give the people the information that they need. I mean, that's what you see this. Just in the last few weeks, I've somehow in my YouTube algorithm has been giving me this young guy. I can't remember his name now, but the name of his channel is Parker Get a Job, which I think is quite funny.
That is quite funny.
But he does a lot of just call-ins with Republican MAGA folks, and so it's been really interesting hearing quite a lot of younger people and where they're coming from, what their thought process is, and they are so stunningly ill-informed. It almost makes you weep.
The mind.
But it's just so tragically sad because they're so certain that they have the facts to their hand, and it's patent nonsense what they're talking about. But it brings back home how important it is that folks have
a well-informed populace.
Yeah,
which we don't. And again, that goes back to what we were talking about before: is the control of our media by the elite ruling class, right? Yeah. And this. And so that they want to do what Plato wanted them to do, and they want to rule. Although, to be fair, Plato was against this ruling class having so much money. He felt like they needed to refrain from avarice, and they needed to So he was against this. I mean, oligarchy,
the pure corruption side of it.
And so the kind of oligarchy where the ruling class was very wealthy was one of the degraded forms of government that he does talk about. So to give Plato his due, but we have this oligarchy controlling the media diet of the vast majority of people. Again, a plug for independent media. Please find independent media, people who are knowledgeable, who are experts in their field, who are doing investigative journalism, and please support them.
Well, the kind of parallel that comes to mind is You are literal diet, right? For eating, consuming, you are fed advertising that's all about this rubbish that you should be eating. To eat healthily and well is both more expensive and takes more work.
Oh yeah,
right?
Definitely, yeah.
And it's the
and
same.
no one's advertising it.
And no one's advertising.
Right, no one's advertising it.
When did you last see an advert for carrots?
Yeah, they just don't. It doesn't happen. Chickpeas.
Or chickpeas.
Your favorite. I quite like them. He hates them.
I was going to say a joke, but it's definitely not family friendly, so I'm not going to go there.
Okay, you can tell me later.
So there we're in that same situation for
it's
for
much
media.
harder and
you've got to do a lot of work.
So.
You've got to pay for it. So
well, you actually don't have to pay for it. You can access it for free. But if you want it to stay some things are behind a paywall.
I would say you do have to pay for it if you want it.
Because
it'll
go away.
It'll go away if you don't
Absolutely.
support it financially, and you have to do more work in order to try and understand how you mentioned right at the beginning, it depends on the context. You've got to understand the context. Well, that takes work and effort to do it.
And time.
Yeah. So there we are. The paradox of tolerance and the paradox of freedom, the paradox of democracy, all these paradoxes, paradox of sovereignty, what does sovereignty actually mean? And how do you have these checks that are meaningful, that allow the freedom to exist, but don't allow that freedom to run away and destroy itself.
Then,
it's like
and take away freedom. Yes,
Tricky. This is why they are paradoxes. Funnily enough,
people have been talking about them for a long time.
For a long time, indeed. Enough on paradoxes?
I think so.
Yeah. Okay.
All right. Well, if you've stayed with us through Popper and the paradox of tolerance and freedom and democracy, I'm going to be a little bit more lighthearted and talk about Socks the Stallion.
Socks the Stallion. Is this bamboo socks?
No,
or
I've been telling you about him, and I sent the link to one of our daughters who likes animal videos as well. I'm not on TikTok. I'm on it, but I never really go on it. But I do go on Facebook, and you get the Facebook Reels. So I kind of watch those, and of course, once you start clicking on. A certain kind, they feed you more.
The algorithm does its
what
job.
It is.
Yeah.
So since I'm vegan, I do tend to click on animal ones, and so it was octopuses for a while, and you get your dog ones, and anyway. But I've clicked on some horse ones, so now I'm getting Socks the Stallion, and I just love them. I was horse obsessed as a kid. I read every book there was about horses. I loved Black Beauty. I used to get, for my birthday and Christmases, statues of horses, which I would play with, and took riding lessons. And when we lived in Louisiana out in the country, I had a horse for a couple of years. So, I mean, it's been years since I've ridden, but I've always loved horses. So the Socks the Stallion, it's somewhere down in England, and his owner Tanya seems quite lovely. I think she has a sister who has early onset dementia, and so she talks about that a bit, and she she'll take her really early, and she'll take her sister out riding and things, and but most of her videos are about Socks the Stallion, and he is quirky. He's a spicy horse. So he's fascinating to watch. When she goes out to catch him, he plays with her. So he rears and he kind of darts at her and he runs around like he wants her to chase him. And you can see a difference in the way he does. And so it can look quite scary. And I think she's had a lot of negative feedback, like he's dangerous and whatever. I mean, she's had him for 20 years, you know. He's semi-retired.
From
he's 20 years old. He's 20 years old, and I think she's had him for maybe 15 years. I get that wrong, but she's had him for a long time. He's semi-retired now, really, because he's getting up in age. But anyway, they just seem to have a lovely relationship, and she just very easy with him. But like when she's leading him, he doesn't just walk along. There's a lot of movement around, and she just kind of goes with him. You know, he's got a lot of energy, he needs to get it out, and he plays with her. And there's a difference in the way he plays with her when she is outside of the fence. His movements are a lot bigger.
Right.
It's like he knows
to
he
temper
can't.
it.
Well, it's like he knows he can't hurt her, so because she's outside the
Right.
fence. Whereas if she's in the fence, he'll do the same movements, but they're smaller and they're a little bit further away. So it's like he's wanting to play, but he's wanting to make sure he doesn't hurt her. Anyway, they're just lovely to watch. So if you like animals and you like the relationship between animals and humans, that's really kind of positive and heartwarming, I would recommend looking up Socks the Stallion.
We will put a link. Is it on YouTube or
Do you
is
know,
it on?
I would have to. I just see them on Facebook,
It's
so you
on
can
Facebook,
follow her on
right.
Facebook.
Yeah.
We can maybe put a link.
Put a
I'm sure I
link.
can
Yeah, if
find
you
it.
find
But
a
anyway,
link,
they're
we'll put
quite
it.
fun and
Yeah.
for a little lighthearted moments of lighthearted joy in the day are.
We need
needed.
those. We
So-
do need those. I love it when the yes, you get given something that just lifts your heart a little bit.
So
amidst all the
Go watch Socks the Stallion.
Socks the Stallion. There you go. You heard it here. I was this week was my slot for doing our local newspaper in the Northeast is the Press and Journal, and one of my friends and colleagues got me onto the list for doing one of the articles for a weekend some years ago now. And
You've been doing it religiously ever since.
I have, literally religiously, as it is the Saturday sermon that goes in, I think it's every 6 weeks. I think there's like 6 of us on the kind of rota. And you think 6 weeks, that's quite a long time.
Comes around really quickly.
Oh, it comes around quickly. And so you're always trying to think of
Something
what you're gonna say and do. And so in case anyone's been wondering why
these leaves.
this mess.
I had been wondering why we were having
because they've been on the kitchen table for the last few days,
drying out.
So I'm actually going to use them for our evening service on Sunday, and they're going to be symbolic because the evening service is a service when folks remembering those who've died. And so the idea of the fallen leaf, and just you look in the shape of how that leaf has transformed itself from the spring green to the autumnal colours, and then it falls to the ground. But it was just reminding me of it's not really a chore, but it's just that you have when you're going to have to be writing something or something like that, you're always in a kind of observational mindset of looking at the world around you and looking out for things that might tell a story, things that you might be able to utilize. And I suppose that, you see that in some comedians who are really observation-based kind of comedians, that they'll just go off on their stories and their yarns about what they've seen, and I love that kind of comedy because you just got to enter their weird little world that they go off onto, and it was Eddie Izzard as he was then,
but Susie now.
Susie
he prefers
now,
Susie. She prefers Susie, and she
was so. She had this, I just remember this, this would have been as a student, so this must be 30 years ago kind of thing. He had this amazing riff about being in a park and just observing folks talking, and then started talking about being at school and French lessons and some of the ridiculous things that you're taught to say.
When are you ever going to need to say?
The monkey is in the tree and this sort of crazy thing. And I remember the first time watching that and just being in hysterics. It was just so funny. But it was that observational kind of comedy. And just that, of course, that is so much of what Jesus did in his storytelling was all observational. It was all looking at what was happening around and just
kind of drawing out inferences.
Yeah, pulling on these ideas and what folks would have known and to talk about it. But you need to be aware of what's happening around you in order to do that, what's connecting with people and things like that. So, I mean, I certainly found over the last few, since we've got a season tickets for the football
Aberdeen.
at Pittodrie, that has opened the doors to so many more conversations, especially with in churches with men, which sometimes are more reticent just to chat than women would be.
But everyone will always talk about football.
Yeah, exactly. And the trials and tribulations. But that's it. It's about
making
that.
Connections.
Yeah, and what's happening in the community around you and being aware of it and thinking about it that way. So that's why the leaves have been sitting on the kitchen table all week, and they will be disappearing.
Thankfully.
On Sunday, you'll be glad. What has amazed me, I fully expected
there to be lots of bugs.
Yeah, and I haven't seen any, which amazes me. So because
they're maybe just all underneath.
Yeah,
hiding.
Well, maybe we'll find them.
You need to clean up if there are.
My job.
Give the table a good wipe down once they're all away.
Definitely, indeed. Okay, so that's me observations of the world around us, which I guess takes us back to our. What we were thinking about earlier as well, but
some of the things in the world you want to hide away from and not observe too closely at times, but
you need to, that's part of being
good citizens
in society is being aware of what's happening. All right, enough for tonight. It's Halloween tonight, and we recently. Well, 2 years ago, moved a house. And where we used to live, we would have
lots of
the whole evening. We would have people coming to the door, and no one here. So
I didn't even. Yeah, I think sad. I bought candy last year.
Yes,
but I didn't even bother to buy candy this year because we didn't have anyone last year.
It was fun having all that candy last year. But but that's a bit of a, because that was nice. That was a fun evening of constantly up and down to the. You couldn't get anything done.
No,
you just had to stay in the kitchen and wait for the doorbell to be ringing.
Well, I had a little bit of Halloween. I was dressed up as a duck at work today.
Excellent. Yeah. For your first week in your new job.
Yeah.
Dressed as up a duck.
With an optional banana hat when I couldn't really put up with the duck hood on because it was very claustrophobic. I could put that down, pretend it wasn't there, put on a banana hat, in which case I was a yellow banana.
Still in a duck costume.
But the ducks, you only saw me from the front.
I see.
And you didn't see the hood hanging behind. Anyway, it was very warm. I was glad to take it off at the end of the day. So we had a little touch of Halloween.
Such is life as a primary school.
Yeah.
Okay. Enough for tonight, I think.
So. All right. Good night, everybody.
Night.